Hello, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 44 years old, and I'm going to tell you the story of how I discovered at 26 years old that my father hadn't eaten a full meal in over 12 years. But this isn't a story about gratitude and forgiveness. This is a story about anger, about a system that failed us, and about the damage that kind of sacrifice does to everyone involved. Before I continue, if you think this story might resonate with you, hit that like button now. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't comfortable, but it's real. And I think it needs to be said. It was 1988. I was 8 years old, living in a small town in rural Ohio, and I genuinely believed that fathers simply didn't get hungry at dinner time. That's just how dads were built, I thought. Different biology or something. Like they ran on different fuel than the rest of us. Only when I became a mother myself did I understand the devastating truth behind my fathers. I already ate routine, and that understanding didn't bring me peace. It brought me rage. We lived in a 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, number 247. I still remember the address because it's burned into my memory like a brand. The kind of house where the aluminum siding rattled like bones when the wind hit it just right. In winter, that rattling was constant. Day and night, like the house itself was shivering, trying to stay warm and failing. The kitchen always smelled like burnt coffee grounds because my mother would brew them twice, sometimes 3 times. Squeezing every last drop of brown water from those same grounds until what came out barely qualified as coffee anymore. It was more like coffee-flavored hot water. Bitter. Thin. Like drinking disappointment. But I thought everyone did that. I thought that's just what coffee was supposed to taste like. I remember watching Mom do it. She'd open the coffee maker, look at the filter with those used grounds, and I'd think she was going to throw them away. But she wouldn't. She'd smooth them out with her finger, add just a tiny pinch of fresh grounds on top, and brew them again. Waste not, want not, she'd say. I thought it was just a saying. A quirky mom thing. Now I know it was survival. The kitchen linoleum was yellow once. Had these optimistic little flowers printed on it? Like someone had imagined a cheerful kitchen when they laid it down decades ago. By the time I was old enough to remember, those flowers were gray ghosts in the high-traffic areas. Worn down to the black adhesive underlayer near the sink, near the stove, near the table. You could track our poverty by following those worn spots. A map of where we stood most, where we struggled most, where Mom spent hours cooking cheap food, stretching ingredients, making something out of nothing. There was a crack in the window above the sink. Started small when I was 5. Dad had covered it with duct tape that first week. Clear packing tape first, then duct tape when that peeled off. That tape stayed there for 13 years. Until I left home at 18. 13 years of looking at that silver scar every single time I washed dishes. The crack got longer over the years, spreading like a fault line. By the time I was in high school, it ran from the bottom corner almost to the top. But we never replaced it. Dad just added more tape. It still works, he'd say. Still keeps the rain out. In winter, you could see your breath in the bathroom. We had one space heater, one of those old ones with the orange coils that glowed when it heated up. We'd move it from room to room depending on where we needed it most. Bathroom in the morning while we got ready for school. Living room in the evening when we did homework. My bedroom at night, but only if I was sick. Otherwise, you just got cold. I'd sleep in sweatpants, 2 pairs of socks, a hoodie, under 2 blankets, and a comforter that was so old the filling had clumped into hard lumps in the corners. You learned that shivering was just part of January, part of February, part of March. You learned that I'm cold wasn't something worth saying because everyone was cold, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. My father, Robert Mitchell, worked as a maintenance man at Lincoln Elementary School. Not my school, Hoover Elementary, where the poor kids went. Lincoln was across town. The nice school. The one with the new playground equipment and the computer lab and the library. That actually had new books. Dad would leave at 5:30 every morning. I'd hear his steel-toed boots on the porch steps. Heavy. Deliberate. The sound of a man carrying weight even before he got to work. He'd start his truck, an old Ford Ranger, brown with rust eating through the wheel wells, and it would cough and sputter in the cold. Sometimes it wouldn't start. He'd have to pop the hood, do something with the carburetor, try again. But he always got it started. And he always left by 5:30. He wouldn't come home until almost 7 at night. Sometimes later. 12, 13, 14-hour days. Overtime, he'd say when he came home especially late. But I learned later there was no overtime pay. He just worked extra hours because things needed fixing and he was the only maintenance person, and if he didn't fix them, they wouldn't get fixed. So he fixed them. My mother, Linda, worked at the Goodwill sorting donations. She'd come home smelling like mothballs and old fabric. Sometimes like mildew. That smell would cling to her hair, her clothes, her skin no matter how much she washed. She'd shower with that cheap bar soap, the kind that dried your skin out, left it feeling tight and flaky. We had lotion, but it was the dollar store kind that was more like scented water than actual moisturizer. But the smell never fully left her. Even on her days off, I could smell it, like it had soaked into her pores. She made $4.25 an hour in 1988. Minimum wage. No benefits. No sick days. No vacation. If she didn't work, she didn't get paid. If she got sick, we lost money. So she didn't get sick. Or if she did, she went to work anyway. We had dinner together every single night. That was the rule. The one non-negotiable thing in our lives. Dad's rule. Family eats together, he'd say. That's what families do. 6 o'clock sharp. Unless Dad was late. Then we'd wait. And we always waited. Danny and I would sit at the table, stomachs growling, the smell of food making us crazy with hunger. Can we start? Danny would ask. No, Mom would say. We wait for your father. But I'm hungry. Then you'll appreciate it more when he gets here. Sometimes we'd wait until 6:30, 7. Once, 7:30. And when Dad finally came through that door, he'd apologize like he'd committed some terrible crime. Sorry. Boiler broke. Had to fix it before tomorrow. It's okay, Bob. Let's eat. The kitchen table was small. Green Formica top with a pattern that tried very hard to look like marble, but just looked like green Formica with white swirls. Metal legs that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. I learned early to keep my elbows off the table, not because of manners, but because if you leaned too hard, you'd tip your plate. 4 chairs. Mismatched. 1 was wood. 2 were metal with vinyl cushions, 1 green and 1 yellow. The 4th was a folding chair we kept out all the time because we didn't have a 4th real chair. Me. My younger brother Danny. Mom. And the empty chair where Dad would sit. That folding chair was Dad's single quotes S. Always. Mom would make dinner. She was good at it, making cheap food taste like something. Spaghetti with meat sauce, except the meat was this weird textured vegetable protein that came in a bag from the food pantry because real ground beef was too expensive. She'd season it heavy with garlic powder and dried oregano, and you almost couldn't tell. It wasn't real meat. Almost. Beans and cornbread. She'd make the cornbread from a mix, but she'd add a can of creamed corn to it to make it more filling. It was sweet and dense, and one piece would sit in your stomach like a brick. Chicken, but only the legs and thighs, the parts no one else wanted. Never breasts. Those were too expensive. She'd bake them with whatever seasoning she had. Sometimes they were good. Sometimes they were dry. We ate them either way. Mac and cheese from a box. The 33-cent kind. She'd add extra milk to make it stretch further, so it was always kind of soupy, but it was warm and it filled you up. Hamburger helper without enough hamburger. She'd use half the meat the box called for and add a can of beans to make up the difference. Hot dogs cut up in baked beans. Fried Spam with eggs. Tuna casserole made with 1 can of tuna instead of 2. That was our rotation. Those meals, over and over in endless variation. She'd set out for plates. 4 forks. For glasses of water or milk if we had it, which we usually didn't. Danny and I would sit down, our stomachs already growling. The food smelled so good. Even the fake meat spaghetti smelled good when you were that hungry. When you'd been hungry all day at school, counting down the hours until dinner. Dad would come in, set his lunch box on the counter, wash his hands at the sink with that orange pumice soap that smelled like industrial cleaner, and grit. That soap was designed for mechanics, for people with grease ground deep into their skin. It would take him a full minute to scrub the dirt out from under his fingernails, out of the lines in his palms, the calluses on his fingers. He'd dry his hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, a thin, threadbare thing that had once been white but was now a dingy gray. Then he'd sit down at his place, that folding chair. And this is what happened. Every single time. Mom would serve Danny first. She'd use this big metal serving spoon, one of the few kitchen tools we had that wasn't falling apart, and she'd pile food onto his plate. A full plate, heaping. More than a 7-year-old, then 8-year-old, then 9-year-old should probably eat. But she gave it to him anyway. Then she'd serve me. Same thing. A full plate. Sometimes so full the food would touch, mixing together. Spaghetti running into green beans, running into a piece of cornbread. Then she'd reach for Dad's plate, and he'd put his hand over it. Not aggressively, gently. Just his palm flat over the empty plate. I'm good, Linda. I ate at work, every single night. The same sentence. The same lie. Bob, you need to eat something. Mom would say this every time too. Like it was part of a script they were performing. Like they'd rehearsed it. I grabbed something from the vending machine around 4. I'm stuffed. Really. Sometimes the excuse would vary. They had leftover pizza in the teacher's lounge. You know how teachers are always ordering too much food for their meetings? Or had a big lunch today. Cafeteria was serving meatloaf. Couldn't eat another bite. Or, you know how it is. They were catering a professional development thing and told us to take the leftovers. I had 2 plates. Or, Jim brought donuts this morning. I ate way too many. Still full. The excuses changed. The details shifted. But the result was always the same. Dad didn't eat. Mom would stand there for a moment, serving spoon still in her hand, steam rising from the pot of spaghetti or the pan of chicken or whatever we were having. She'd look at him. He'd look back. And something would pass between them. Some wordless communication that I was too young to understand. Then Mom would sigh, not dramatically, just the small, tired sound, and she'd make herself a plate. Always smaller than ours. Always. If Danny and I got heaping plates, Mom got a normal portion. If we got normal portions, Mom got a small plate. She served herself last and she served herself least. But I didn't notice that then. Then she'd sit down. And 3 of us would eat. Dad would sit there with a glass of water. Sometimes with a cup of that terrible twice-brewed coffee. And he'd watch us. Not in a creepy way. Not in a sad way, even. He looked content. Satisfied. Like watching us eat was somehow feeding him. How was school, baby girl? He'd always start with me, fine. Just fine? What did you learn today? I'd shrug, mouth full of spaghetti. Math, yeah? What kind of math? Long division. Long division? That's a tough one. You get it? Another shrug, sort of. You're smart. You'll get it. Just takes practice. Then he turned to Danny. How about you, champ? Good day? And Danny would launch into some elaborate story about recess or his friend Marcus or the frog they found by the playground or the kid who threw up in class or something. Danny always had stories. And Dad would listen. Really listen. Not just nodding along. He'd ask questions. Laugh at the funny parts. Make sympathetic noises at the sad parts. So what happened to the frog? We put him in a box with grass and stuff. Yeah. But then Mrs. Henderson made us let him go. Well, frogs gotta be free, buddy. Can't keep em cooped up. I know. But I wanted to keep him. I bet you did. All while we ate. And he didn't. I'd take another bite of spaghetti. Danny would shovel in his food like he was racing against time. And Dad would just sit there watching. Smiling that tired smile that never quite reached his eyes. After dinner, there was a routine for that too. Danny and I would ask to be excused. We'd take our plates to the sink. Then we'd go watch TV or do homework or play. But Dad would stay. He'd help Mom clear the table. He'd wash the dishes, our 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 glasses while Mom dried. They'd work in silence mostly. Sometimes Mom would tell him about her day. About the weird stuff people donated to Goodwill. About her co-worker Denise who was always late. About the manager who was never there. Dad would listen and wash and nod. Then, after the kitchen was clean, after everything was put away, Dad would go sit in his recliner. That brown lousy boy with the duct tape on both armrests and a spring that poked through the bottom cushion if you sat wrong. He'd turn on the news. Local news first, then the national news. And within 20 minutes, he'd be asleep. Not comfortable sleep. Not restful sleep. The kind of sleep where your body just shuts down because it has no choice. Because it's been running on empty for too long. His head would loll to the side. His mouth would fall open. Sometimes he'd snore. And he'd sleep through both news programs. Through Jeopardy. Through Wheel of Fortune. Around 8:30, Mom would wake him, Bob. Bed. He'd startle awake. Look around like he'd forgotten where he was. Like he'd been somewhere else entirely and had to remember his way back. What time is it? Almost 9. Christ. I fell asleep again. You're tired, yeah? Then he'd stand up, stretch. His back would crack loud pops that I could hear from across the room. His knees would crack, his neck. And then he'd do his rounds. Check the locks on both doors. Front door. Back door. He'd rattle the knob to make sure it was really locked. Turn off all the lights. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Then he'd come to my room. He'd stand in the doorway. I'd be reading or pretending to be asleep. Night, baby girl, love you. Love you too, Dad. And before he'd leave, he'd always say the same thing, everything's gonna be alright. You sleep tight. I believed him every single time. Then he'd go to Danny's room. Same routine. Then he'd go to bed. And the next morning at 5:30, he'd get up and do it all again. In my mind, my father was invincible. He was the strongest man in the world. The smartest. The most capable. He could fix anything. When the car broke down, which it did constantly, Dad would fix it himself. He'd lie on his back in the driveway on a piece of cardboard. Tools spread around him like surgical instruments, and he'd spend hours under there doing Something. I didn't know what. But he'd come out covered in grease and oil and the car would work again. When the roof leaked, he'd climb up there with tar and shingles he'd pulled from someone's construction dump site. And he'd patch it himself. When my bike chain fell off, he'd have it back on into minutes. When the toaster stopped working, he'd take it apart, fiddle with the wires, put it back together. And it would work. When the TV picture got fuzzy, he'd adjust the antenna on the roof. When the toilet kept running, he'd replace some part inside the tank with a part he'd gotten at a yard sale. Everything. He could fix everything. Except he couldn't fix the one thing that was actually broken. He couldn't fix the fact that we didn't have enough money to feed for people. So he fixed it the only way he knew how. He removed himself from the equation. One mouth. The biggest mouth. The one that needed the most calories because he was doing physical labor 12 hours a day. He just opted out and called it already eating. There were other things. Things I noticed but didn't question. Things that make sense now in the worst possible way. Dad's lunchbox, for instance. That black metal thing with the rusty latch. It was old when he got it. Probably from the 70s, dented. Scratched. But it still closed, still kept food coldish with the little ice pack Mom would freeze overnight. Every morning, Mom would pack it. I watched her do it 1,000 times. She'd make a sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly, usually. Sometimes just peanut butter because jelly was too expensive. Sometimes bologna if we had it, which was rare. She'd wrap it in wax paper. Then in a plastic grocery bag because we reused everything. She'd add an apple, often bruised on one side. She'd buy the bruised apples from the discount bin at the grocery store. 10 pounds for $1. A small bag of chips. The generic kind from Dollar General. She'd pour chips from the big bag into a sandwich bag to make them last longer. Sometimes a cookie if we had them. Usually we didn't. That was Dad's lunch. Every day. The same thing. Dad would take the lunchbox when he left at 5:30. He'd grab it off the counter, kiss Mom on the cheek, and head out the door. When he came home at 7, he'd set it back on the counter. Mom would open it, take out the containers, the wax paper, the plastic bag, the sandwich bag, and she'd wash them. She'd wash empty containers, empty wax paper, an empty sandwich bag that never had chips in it. I assumed he'd eaten everything. Assumed the emptiness was proof of consumption. Why would I assume otherwise? But here's what I remember now, looking back with adult eyes. The containers were to clean. If you eat a peanut butter sandwich from wax paper, there are crumbs, smears. Something. These were pristine. If you eat an apple, you have a core. Where were the cores? If you eat chips from a sandwich bag, there's grease residue. There are crumbs in the corners. These bags looked like they'd never had food in them at all. Because they hadn't. Not in Dad's mouth, anyway. I also noticed though I didn't understand that Dad's clothes were getting bigger on him. His work shirts, those Dickies work shirts in dark blue and gray, they started looking loose. The collars gaped around his neck. The shoulders hung off him. His pants sagged. Even with a belt cinched tight, they'd slip down his hips. Dad's losing weight, I said to Mom once. I was maybe 9 or 10. We were folding laundry. I was matching socks. Mom was folding Dad's work shirts. She held one up, looked at it. I saw something cross her face. Something sad. Something scared. But then it was gone. He's just working hard, honey. Physical job. But he looks skinny. He's fine. His face looks different. Sarah, your father is fine, drop it. Her voice had an edge to it. Not angry, but firm. Final. So I dropped it. But I'd noticed. His face did look different. Thinner. The cheekbones more pronounced. The eyes more sunken. His wrists looked smaller. I could see the bones in his hands more clearly. His neck looked thinner. His wedding ring was loose. I noticed once when he was gesturing while talking and it slipped and spun around his finger. He was disappearing. Slowly. Right in front of us. And no one said anything. I noticed Dad coming home and going straight to bed sometimes. Not often. Maybe once or twice a month. But it happened. He'd come through the door, barely say hello, and head straight for the bedroom. Not feeling well, he'd mumble. Just need to lie down. You want dinner? Mom would call after him. Maybe later. Save me a plate. Mom would put his plate in the fridge. Cover it with plastic wrap. She'd set it on the top shelf where we could all see it. There was something hopeful about that plate. Like if we could just see it there waiting for him, then he'd be fine. He'd get up later and eat it and everything would be okay. But the next morning, when I'd open the fridge to get milk for my cereal, the plate would be gone. Back in the cabinet. Washed. Dried. Empty. Did Dad eat his dinner? I asked once. He ate it late, after you went to bed, Mom said without looking up from her coffee. He felt better around 9. I believed her. I believed her because I was a child and children believe their mothers. But I also believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because if Dad hadn't eaten his dinner, that meant something was wrong. And I didn't want anything to be wrong. So I chose belief. We went out to eat maybe twice a year. Birthdays, usually. Mine in June. Danny's in October. We'd go to Denny's or Ponderosa or Shoney's. Somewhere with a kids eat free night because that made it cheaper. This was a big deal. A huge deal. We'd talk about it for days beforehand. Where do you want to go for your birthday? Can we go to Ponderosa? They have the buffet. We'll see. We'll see meant yes if we can afford it, no if we can't. Usually we could. On my 9th birthday, we went to Ponderosa. Danny and I were so excited. The buffet meant you could eat as much as you wanted. All you can eat. That phrase felt like magic. We walked in. The smell of food hit me like a wave. Me cooking bread. Something sweet. We sat in a booth. Red vinyl seats with duct tape over the cracks. But I didn't care. This wasn't home. This was a restaurant. A waitress came. Older woman, tired eyes, stained apron. What can I get you folks? These two will do the buffet, Mom said, pointing at me and Danny. And for you? I'll have the soup and salad bar. And you, sir? Everyone looked at Dad. He looked at the menu for a long time, too long. Like he was doing complicated math in his head. Just a side salad for me. The waitress wrote it down without expression. Mom's face tightened. Bob, get a real meal. It's Sarah's birthday. I'm not that hungry, Lynn. You know me. Small appetite. Bob, I'm fine. Really. Side salad's perfect. Mom pressed her lips together. Didn't say anything else. The waitress left. Danny and I ran to the buffet. We piled our plates high. Fried chicken. Mashed potatoes. Macaroni and cheese. Green beans. Rolls. More rolls. We went back 3 times. We ate until we were so full we felt sick. Mom got her soup and salad. She ate slowly, making it last. Dad got his little side salad. Iceberg lettuce, a few sad tomato wedges, shredded carrot, ranch dressing on the side. He ate it slowly too, taking small bites, chewing thoroughly, making it last. But I noticed something. When I went up for my second plate and came back, there were fewer fries on my first plate. When Danny went to the bathroom, there were fewer chicken nuggets on his plate. Dad was stealing our food. Not stealing. We had more than we could eat. We'd left food on our plates. But he was eating our leftovers. The stuff we'd touched. The stuff we'd bitten. The stuff we didn't want. And he'd smile while he did it. These are the best fries I've ever had, he said, taking one from my plate. I beamed. Really? Really? Something about Ponderosa fries. Can't beat 'em. He took another. I pushed my plate toward him. You can have more if you want. No, you eat. It's your birthday. But he took one more. And I felt special. Like I had something Dad wanted. Like I could give him something. Now I know he was just starving. Now I know he'd ordered a side salad, the cheapest thing on the menu so we could afford for Danny and me to eat at the buffet. Now I know those stolen fries weren't about them tasting good. They were about survival. There was one other thing that happened regularly. Something I didn't think about until much later. Danny and I would sometimes not finish our dinner. We'd eat most of it, but not all. Kids never finish everything. I'm full, I'd say, pushing my plate away with food still on it. You sure? Mom would ask. Yeah. I can't eat anymore. All right. She'd take my plate, scrape the leftovers into a container, put it in the fridge. Same with Danny's plate. Leftovers for lunch tomorrow, she'd say. But here's the thing. Those leftovers never made it to our lunch. We never ate them at school. We got school lunch. Free lunch because we qualified for the program. So who ate the leftovers? Not Mom. She took her lunch to work. I'd seen her pack it. So who? Dad. Dad ate our leftovers. Our half-eaten chicken legs. Our picked-over spaghetti. Our abandoned green beans. He ate what we didn't want. Like a dog under the table. Grateful for scraps. When I was 12, something big happened. Thanksgiving. My mom's sister, Aunt Carol, was coming to our house. With her husband Jim and their 2 kids, Rachel and Tyler. This was unusual. We usually went to their house for holidays. Their nice house in the suburbs with the 2-car garage and the sectional sofa and the big TV. But that year, Aunt Carol was 8 months pregnant with their 3rd kid and didn't want to host. So we hosted. Mom was stressed about it. I could tell. She cleaned the house for a week. Scrubbed everything. Moved furniture around to make more space. Borrowed folding chairs from the church. And she cooked. Oh God, did she cook? She started on Monday. Making pies. Pumpkin and apple. The smell filled the house. Tuesday, she made rolls. Dozens of them. froze them so they'd be fresh. Wednesday, she made the stuffing, the green bean casserole, the cranberry sauce from a can that she doctored up with orange zest and cinnamon. Thursday morning, she got up at 4 a.m. to put the turkey in, a turkey we couldn't afford. I know that now. But she bought it anyway, a 15-pound turkey. And she cooked it all day, basting it every hour, making the house smell like Thanksgiving is supposed to smell. By the time Aunt Carol's family arrived at 2 o'clock, our small house was bursting with food. More food than I'd ever seen in one place. The table, our small green Formica table plus a card table we'd set up next to it, was completely covered. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, green bean casserole, rolls, cranberry sauce, corn, sweet potatoes. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like other people's Thanksgivings. And I was so proud. We all sat down. 7 of us crammed around those 2 tables. Barely any room for elbows. But it was warm. Full. Loud in a good way. Uncle Jim said grace. A long one. Thanking God for family and food and blessings. Then we ate. Plates piled high. Everyone taking everything. Seconds. Thirds. Laughing. Talking over each other. Uncle Jim telling jokes. Aunt Carol complaining about being pregnant. Rachel and Tyler arguing about something. It was perfect. It was normal. Except for one thing. Dad wasn't eating. He sat there at the head of our small table with a smile on his face and a glass of water in his hand. No plate. No food. Nothing. Bob, you haven't touched anything, Aunt Carol said. I snacked all day helping Linda cook. I'm absolutely stuffed. Can barely move. On Thanksgiving? Uncle Jim laughed. Come on, man. You gotta eat. It's Thanksgiving. I will. Just need to digest a bit first. You all go ahead. They did. We ate for an hour. Then pie. Then more pie. Dad sat there the entire time. Watching. Smiling. Saying he was too full to eat. My cousin Rachel whispered to me at one point, "Why isn't your dad eating?" I shrugged. He ate earlier. On Thanksgiving? That's weird. He does that. She looked at me like I was crazy. But I didn't think it was crazy. It was just Dad. After everyone left, after we'd sent them home with containers of leftovers after we'd cleaned up, I went to bed exhausted and happy. It had been a good day. A normal day. Or so I thought. Here's what I didn't know. Here's what Mom told me years later. Dad hadn't snacked all day. He'd been in the garage most of that day. Staying out of your way, he'd told Mom. But he hadn't snacked. He'd fasted. For 2 days before Thanksgiving, he'd fasted. Eaten nothing. So his stomach would shrink. So he wouldn't be hungry during the meal. So he could sit at that table surrounded by more food than we'd had in our house all year and not be tempted to eat it. Today's 40-8 hours without food. So he could watch his family eat turkey. So there'd be enough for everyone else. So Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim wouldn't know how poor we really were today's. And then he sat there and smiled and lied and said he'd snacked all day. The years went by like that. Same routine. Same dinner table. Same lies. When I was 14, something changed. Mom got a raise at the Goodwill. 50 cents more per hour. From $4.25 to $4.75. $20 more per week. $80 more per month. It doesn't sound like much. But it was everything. Suddenly, dinner was different. We started having meat more often. Real meat. Chicken breasts instead of just legs and thighs. Pork chops. Ground beef occasionally. Sometimes even steak. And Dad started eating with us. Not every night. But maybe twice a week he'd actually put food on his plate. The first time it happened, Danny noticed immediately. Wow, Dad's eating dinner. Mom shot him a look that could melt steel. Danny shut up. But we all noticed. Dad served himself. A small portion. Smaller than what Danny and I got. But food nonetheless. And he ate it. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was testing whether his body remembered how to process food at dinner time. This is really good, Linda, he said. Mom's eyes got shiny. She looked down at her plate. Glad you like it. I was so happy. I remember thinking, finally Dad's hungry again. Finally whatever was wrong with his appetite is fixed. I didn't think, finally we can afford to feed for people. I didn't think, finally Dad doesn't have to choose between eating and letting his kids eat. I just thought his hunger had come back. Like it had been sleeping. Hibernating. Not screaming inside him for 12 years. I left home at 18. Went to community college about 40 minutes away. Studied business, though I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I couldn't afford to live on campus. Even community college dorms were too expensive, so I commuted. Every day, 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back, in that old Honda Civic Dad had fixed up for me. He'd spent 3 months working on that car. Got it from a junkyard for $200. It barely ran. But he fixed it. New brakes. New tires from a used tire place. Oil change. Transmission work. Something with the starter. He taught me how to check the oil. How to change a tire. How to jump start it if the battery died. You need to know this stuff, he said. Can't always rely on someone else. I'd come home on weekends. Friday night usually. Sometimes Saturday morning. And we'd have dinner. Same as always. Sometimes Dad ate. Sometimes he didn't. But I was too busy with my own life to pay attention. Too wrapped up in my classes and my part-time job at Target and my friends and the guy I was sort of dating. I didn't see Dad anymore. I just saw the role, father. Not the person, Robert. Not the man who was still, even then, probably skipping meals sometimes. At 22, I met Marcus. He was working construction on a project near Target. He'd come in sometimes to buy snacks or drinks during his lunch break, tall, broad shoulders, hands rough with calluses, smile that made my stomach flip. We started talking, then dating. 6 months later, he proposed. Simple proposal. No fancy restaurant. He just asked me one night while we were watching TV at his apartment. Will you marry me? Yeah, I said, okay. We got married at the courthouse. My parents, his mom, Danny, and 2 of our friends as witnesses. Then we went to Applebee's for dinner. It was perfect. We had our daughter Emma when I was 24. And that's when everything shattered. Emma was 2 years old. It was a Tuesday in March. One of those gray, heavy days where the sky presses down on you and you feel like you're walking through water. Cold but not cold enough to snow. Just cold enough to be miserable. Marcus was working late. A big commercial project that was behind schedule. He'd been pulling 12, 14-hour days trying to catch up. I was home alone with Emma trying to make dinner. She was in that phase. The terrible twos. The phase where everything is a battle. Getting dressed is a battle. Brushing teeth is a battle. Eating is World War III. I'd made spaghetti. The same kind Mom used to make. The cheap kind with the fake meat crumbles because we couldn't afford real ground beef. Even now, even with Marcus working full-time and me working part-time at a medical office, we were still struggling. Still stretching every dollar. Still making choices. Emma was refusing the spaghetti. Yucky? It's not yucky, baby. It's spaghetti. You like spaghetti? No, yucky. Just try one bite. No. She pushed her plate away. It slid across the table and almost fell off the edge. I caught it. Emma, you need to eat dinner. No. Don't want it. You haven't eaten since lunch. You must be hungry. Not hungry. But I knew she was. I'd heard her stomach growling. I was exhausted. I'd been up since 5. Gotten Emma ready and dropped her off at daycare. Worked a full shift at the medical office. Dealing with insurance companies and angry patients and a doctor who was never satisfied. Picked Emma up. Grocery store home. Tried to clean the house while Emma pulled everything out of the cabinets. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I was hungry. And my daughter was refusing to eat. I looked at her plate. Full of spaghetti. Then at my plate. Also full. And I heard myself say something I didn't plan to say. Something that came from some deep, unconscious place. Fine. I'll just eat it myself. I already ate anyway. I froze. Fork halfway between my plate and Emma's. The words hung in the air. I already ate anyway. But I hadn't. I hadn't eaten lunch. Too busy. We'd been short-staffed and I'd worked through my lunch break. I'd eaten a granola bar at 10 a.m. That was it. I was starving. My stomach had been growling for hours. But I was about to give Emma my portion and tell her I wasn't hungry. I was about to lie. The exact same way my father lied. Exact same way. I set the fork down. My hands were shaking. Emma was still whining about the spaghetti, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All I could hear was my father's voice, echoing through decades, through thousands of dinners. I already ate, but he hadn't. He hadn't eaten at all. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. My cheap, second-hand kitchen table that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. Emma's voice faded into background noise. And the memories came. Not as memories of happy family dinners. Not as memories of normal childhood. As evidence. As proof. As a pattern I'd been too young, too stupid, too full to see. The lunchbox that came home full every day. I saw it now. Really saw it. Those containers to clean. No residue. No crumbs. No apple cores. No chip grease. Because he'd never opened them. He'd given the food away. Or thrown it away. Or anything other than eating it himself. The weight loss. God, the weight loss. How had I not seen it? How had I watched my father literally disappear and thought it was just working hard? His shirt's hanging off him. His belt on the smallest hole, then smaller, then new holes punched with an ice pick. His face getting thinner and thinner until I could see the shape of his skull. His wrists like bird bones. His wedding ring spinning loose on his finger. He was starving. Right in front of us. And we ate and ate and ate. While he disappeared. The exhaustion. Falling asleep in his chair every single night. Not because he was old, he was only in his 40s then. Because his body was trying to conserve energy. Because when you don't eat, your body shuts down everything non-essential. And consciousness is non-essential. So he'd sleep. Deep, sudden, collapse sleep. The sleep of starvation. I thought about the way he'd watch us eat. That smile. That satisfied smile. I'd thought he was happy. I'd thought watching us eat made him happy. And maybe it did. But what kind of fucked up situation makes a man happy to watch his children eat while he starves? What kind of system creates that? What kind of world allows that? I thought about Thanksgiving. Him sitting there at the head of the table. Surrounded by more food than we'd had all year. Turkey, stuffing, potatoes, pie. Everything. And he ate nothing. Because he'd fasted for 2 days. Fasted. Like a monk. Like he was preparing for some religious experience. But his religion was us. His sacrifice was for us. And we had no idea. I thought about the times we went out to eat. Him ordering a side salad. The cheapest thing on the menu. So we could afford the buffet. So Danny and I could eat all we wanted. And then stealing our leftover fries. Eating what we didn't want. What we touched and abandoned. Like he didn't deserve fresh food. Like he was only worth our scraps. I thought about him eating our leftovers at home. Our half-eaten chicken. Our picked-over casseroles. Standing at the counter in the dark at midnight. After everyone was asleep. So no one would see. So no one would know. Eating cold food straight from the container. Because that's all he allowed himself. I sat there at my table. Emma still crying about the spaghetti. And I started crying too. Not gentle tears. Not sad movie tears. Ugly, violent, shoulder-shaking sobs. Because I finally understood. My father had starved himself. For 12 years. So my brother and I could eat. And I never knew. I was so full. So satisfied. So completely, totally, absolutely blind. While my father's body consumed itself. But here's the thing. Here's what I felt that I didn't expect. I didn't feel grateful. I felt angry, furious. Not at my father. Never at my father. At everything else. At the whole goddamn world. If this story is making you uncomfortable, good. It should. Leave a comment and tell me what you're feeling. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this rage I'm about to describe. I was angry that we lived in a country, the richest country in the world, where a man working 12-hour days couldn't afford to feed his family. I was angry that my father had to choose between eating and letting his children eat. I was angry that this was even a choice. That this was a situation that existed. That this was normal. That thousands, millions of families were in the same situation. And no one was doing anything about it. I was angry at a system that paid maintenance workers so little they had to starve. My father worked 12-hour days doing physical labor. Lifting, climbing, fixing, building. The kind of work that burns thousands of calories. And he was paid minimum wage. $3.35 an hour in 1988. 40 hours a week was $134 a week. Before taxes. $536 a month. For 12-hour days. For breaking his back. For keeping an entire school running. And that wasn't enough to feed his family. I was angry at a system that paid Goodwill workers minimum wage to sort rich people's cast-offs. My mother stood on her feet for 8 hours a day, breathing in mold and dust and God knows what else. Sorting through trash that people were too lazy to throw away themselves. And she made for $0.25 an hour. $170 a week. $680 a month. For destroying her lungs. For developing arthritis in her hands from sorting endless bags of clothes. And that wasn't enough either. Together, my parents made about $1,000 to $100 a month. Rent was for $100. Utilities were $150. The car insurance, gas, and maintenance was $200. That left for $150 for food, clothing, medical expenses, and everything else for a family of 4. $50 a week for food. For people. $1.78 per person per day. And people wonder why my father starved. People wonder why we were poor. The math isn't complicated. I was angry that my father's options were work himself to death or watch his children go hungry. Those were the choices. Work until your body breaks. Or let your children suffer. And he chose to work himself to death. Because what other choice did he have? I was angry that no one helped us. We lived in a town of 8,000 people. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone went to the same grocery store, the same church, the same post office. Everyone knew we were struggling, and no one did anything. The school knew I qualified for free lunch. Did they ever ask if I got dinner? No. Did they ever ask if my father ate? No. They gave me a tray of food every day and sent me home and didn't think about what happened after 3 o'clock. The church we went to every Sunday knew we were poor. We were in the prayer requests every other week. Pray for the Mitchell family as they go through financial hardship. Did they ever do more than pray? They gave us a food basket at Christmas, a turkey and some canned goods. That was it. Once a year. The rest of the time, prayers. Thoughts and prayers. No money. No job leads. No rent assistance. No real help. Just prayers. Because prayers are free. And helping costs money. Our neighbors saw my father getting thinner. They saw his clothes hanging off him. They saw him working on weekends, doing odd jobs for extra money. Did they ever bring over a casserole? A bag of groceries? Anything? No. Because poverty makes people uncomfortable. It's easier to look away. It's easier to pretend you don't see. It's easier to tell yourself that if someone's really struggling, they'll ask for help. But poor people don't ask for help. You know why? Because asking for help requires admitting you're poor. And admitting you're poor means admitting you've failed. And admitting you've failed as a parent, admitting you can't feed your own children, is worse than starving. It's worse than dying. So my father starved in silence. And everyone let him. Everyone walked by and saw and did nothing. Because it wasn't their problem. Because he was working, wasn't he? He had a job. If he was really struggling, he'd get a better job. He'd pull himself up by his bootstraps. He'd work harder. Never mind that he was already working 12-hour days. Never mind that he was already doing everything right. Never mind that the system was broken and no amount of hard work would fix it. He just needed to work harder. And if he couldn't, well, that was his fault. That night, after Emma finally ate something, after Marcus came home, after we'd put Emma to bed, I told Marcus what had happened. About the I already ate moment. About the memories flooding back. About finally understanding. He held me while I cried. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know. I need to talk to my mom, okay? So I called her. It was almost 11 at night. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Sarah? What's wrong, Mom? I need to ask you something. What is it? Are you okay? Is Emma okay? We're fine. I need to know something, okay? Did Dad actually eat at work? All those years? Silence. Long, heavy, suffocating silence. I could hear her breathing. Could hear her sitting up in bed. Could hear her trying to decide how to answer. Sarah, Mom. Please. The truth. Did he? More silence. Then, no, baby. He didn't. Even though I'd known, hearing her say it felt like being punched. How long? Sarah, I don't think. How long, Mom? She sighed. The sound of defeat. Of a secret finally being too heavy to carry. From when you were about 3 until you were 15. Maybe 16. 12 or 13 years. 12 years. At minimum. 12 years of I already ate. 12 years of watching his children eat while his stomach ate itself. 12 years of lying every single day. Why didn't you tell me? You were a child. What were we supposed to say? The truth. You should have told me the truth. And what would that have done, Sarah? Would you have eaten less? Would you have felt guilty every meal? Would that have made anything better? I don't know, maybe. At least I would have known. Known what? That your father was sacrificing everything for you? That we couldn't afford to feed our own children? That despite working every hour God gave us, we still couldn't make ends meet? What good would that knowledge have done you? It's better than finding out at 26 that my entire childhood was built on my father's starvation. My voice broke. Mom started crying too. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. We did the best we could. I know you did. I'm not angry at you. Or at Dad. I'm so angry, Mom. At everything. At the whole world. I know, baby, I know. Mom, I need to know everything, please. I need to understand. And she told me. She told me all of it. She told me that Dad's lunchbox came home full every day because he gave his lunch away. To students whose parents forgot to pack them lunch. To the new teacher who was struggling financially. To the janitor who mentioned he'd run out of groceries before payday. Sometimes he'd just leave it in the break room with a note, free lunch. Help yourself. Because even when he was starving, he couldn't stand to see someone else hungry. Even when he had nothing, he gave what little he had. She told me the vending machine story was a lie. The teacher's lounge pizza was a lie. The big lunch was a lie. The catered meeting leftovers were a lie. All of it. Every excuse. Every explanation. All lies. He'd crafted an entire mythology around why he wasn't hungry. And we believed it. Because why wouldn't we? She told me that Dad would only eat dinner with us on nights when there was genuinely enough for 4 people. When they'd gotten food from the church pantry. When someone at work had given him a grocery store gift card. When Aunt Carol had brought over leftovers from her house. When there were actual, true leftovers from a meal. But most nights, there wasn't enough. Most nights, the choice was for people eat small portions and everyone goes to bed a little hungry, or 3 people eat full portions and 1 person doesn't eat at all. And Dad made that choice easy. I already ate. 3 words that let the rest of us be full. She told me that she tried to stop him. So many times. Bob, you have to eat. You're going to get sick. They're growing, Linda. They need it more than I do. They need a father who's alive more than they need seconds. They'll have both. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're losing weight. You're exhausted all the time. I said I'm fine. And that would be the end of it. His voice would get that edge. That finality. And Mom would stop pushing. Because what was she going to do? Force him to eat? Take food from her children's plates and put it on his? There wasn't a good answer. So she'd pack his lunch every day knowing he wouldn't eat it. And she'd watch him get thinner. And she'd lie awake at night worrying about him. And she'd cry in the shower where no one could hear her. And she'd do it all again the next day. She told me that sometimes late at night, after everyone was asleep, Dad would eat something. A piece of bread with butter. A bowl of cereal. A few crackers. Whatever was cheapest. Whatever wouldn't be missed. He'd eat it standing at the counter in the dark. Quickly. Quietly. Like a thief stealing from his own family. And then he'd wash the dish immediately. Erase the evidence. So no one would know. She told me about the times Dad worked double shifts, weekends, holidays. Any overtime he could get. And he'd use that extra money every penny for groceries. Not for himself. He didn't buy new work boots when his had holes in the soles. He didn't buy a new coat when his was held together with duct tape. He didn't get his teeth fixed even though he needed it. Every extra dollar went to food for his children. More food that we would eat while he watched. She told me that when I was 12 and we hosted Thanksgiving, Dad had fasted for 2 days beforehand. Not just skipped meals. Fasted. Nothing but water. For 48 hours. So his stomach would shrink. So he wouldn't feel hunger pangs during the meal. So he could sit at that table surrounded by abundance and not be tempted. Why? I asked. Why would he do that? Because your Aunt Carol didn't know how bad things were. And he didn't want her to know. He had his pride, Sarah. He couldn't let his wife's family see that he couldn't provide. So he fasted. And he smiled. And he lied. 2 days without food. So his pride could stay intact. So we could look normal. So no one would pity us. She told me about the raise she got when I was 14. 50 cents more per hour. From $4.25 to $4.75. $20 more per week. And Dad cried when she told him. She came home from work, told him about the raise, and he put his face in his hands and cried. Actually cried. Sitting at that green Formica table. His shoulders shaking. Making sounds he tried to muffle. Why did he cry? I asked, though I already knew. Because it meant he could finally eat dinner with his family again. Not every night. But sometimes. And that was enough to break him. After 12 years of starving, the possibility of sometimes eating was enough to make him cry. By the time Mom finished talking, it was almost 2 in the morning. We'd been on the phone for 3 hours. I thanked her. Told her I loved her. That I wasn't angry at her or Dad. That I just needed to understand. She said she understood. We hung up. And I sat in my dark living room, listening to the house settle, and I felt something crystallize inside me. Not sadness. Not grief. Pure, clear, focused rage. I wasn't angry at my father. How could I be? He'd done what he thought he had to do. He'd sacrificed himself because that's what the world told him fathers do. That's what men do. Provide. Protect. Even if it kills you. No, I wasn't angry at him. I was angry for him. I was angry at every politician who'd ever voted against raising the minimum wage. Everyone who'd said, if you don't like your pay, get a better job, as if better jobs grew on trees. Everyone who'd cut food assistance programs while taking corporate donations. Everyone who'd said, we can't afford to help people while funding wars and tax breaks for billionaires. Every single one of them had a hand in my father's starvation. I was angry at every person who'd ever said, poor people are just lazy. My father worked harder than most people work in a lifetime. 12-hour days. 7 days a week sometimes. Manual labor that destroyed his body. And he still couldn't afford to eat. So tell me again about lazy. Tell me again about bootstraps. Tell me again how hard work leads to success. I'm listening. I was angry at every economist and think tank expert who'd ever said, the free market will sort it out. The free market sorted my father into starvation. The free market decided his labor was worth $3.35 an hour. The free market determined that profits mattered more than his life. So fuck the free market. I was angry at every person who'd ever walked past us in that grocery store and judged. Who'd seen mom counting change at the register? Who'd seen us using food stamps when we finally swallowed our pride enough to apply? Who'd seen our worn-out clothes and our old car and our obvious poverty? And judged? Who'd whispered to their kids, that's why you stay in school? Who'd felt superior because they had more money? Who'd felt sorry for us without ever offering help? Every single one of them was complicit. I was angry at a system that called my father's sacrifice noble, that romanticized it, that made stories about parents giving up food for their children into heartwarming anecdotes instead of horror stories. This isn't noble. This is tragic. This is preventable. This is a choice society makes. We choose to pay people poverty wages. We choose to cut social programs. We choose to let parents starve. And then we call it noble when they do. We call it sacrifice. We call it love. As if love requires destruction. As if being a good parent means killing yourself slowly. As if there's no other way. There is another way. We just don't choose it. Because it would cost money. And we'd rather let fathers starve than pay taxes. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Marcus, listening to him breathe, and I couldn't turn my brain off. All I could think about was my father. Sitting at that table. Every night. For 12 years. Watching us eat. Smiling. Lying. Dying. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick. Asked Marcus to watch Emma. And I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up at 9 a.m. knowing Dad would be home. It was his day off. I knocked. Mom answered, surprise on her face. Sarah? What are you? I need to talk to Dad. She looked at me for a long moment. Saw something in my face. Nodded. Stepped aside. Dad was in the kitchen. Sitting at that same green Formica table. Drinking coffee. The real kind now. They could afford the real kind. He looked up when I walked in. Hey, baby girl. What are you doing here? Everything okay? I sat down across from him. My heart was pounding. No, Dad. Everything's not okay. His face changed. Worry immediately. What's wrong? Is it Emma, Marcus? No. They're fine. It's about you, me? Why didn't you eat? He froze. Coffee cup halfway to his mouth. What? All those years. Why didn't you eat dinner? He set the cup down carefully. Sarah, I don't know what your mother told you, but she told me the truth, finally. And I need to hear it from you. There's nothing to. Don't lie to me. Please. Not anymore. I can't take any more lies. My voice broke. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And something in his face crumbled. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. What do you want to know? Everything. I want to know everything. And he told me. In his own words. In his own way. He told me about the day he realized they couldn't afford to feed for people. I was 3. Danny was a newborn. Dad had just gotten paid. He'd brought home his check $134 for a week's work. He'd sat at the table with Mom and they'd done the math: rent, utilities, car, diapers, formula for Danny. What was left for food was $30. $30 for a week. For people. It wasn't enough. They sat there and looked at the numbers and knew it wasn't enough. What did you do? I asked. Your mother said we needed to apply for food stamps, for WIC, for any help we could get. And she was right, but I couldn't, not yet. My pride wouldn't let me. I thought if I just worked harder, picked up more hours, we'd be okay. But you couldn't pick up more hours, no. I was already working 60 hours a week. And overtime didn't pay any extra. So I thought, if I just ate less, that would help. I'd skip lunch, eat a small dinner, cut back. But you didn't cut back. You cut it all. He nodded. It started as skipping lunch, then eating a smaller dinner, then, I don't know. It just became easier to not eat at all. To tell you I'd already eaten. To give you more. For 12 years, yeah. You starved yourself for 12 years. I didn't starve. I ate enough to survive. Barely. You got ulcers, Dad. I know. You lost so much weight Mom thought you were dying. I know. Your body was eating itself. I know. His voice rose. Then he caught himself. Took a breath. I know. But what was I supposed to do, Sarah? Let you go hungry? Let Danny go hungry. You were children. You needed to eat. I was a grown man. I could handle it. You shouldn't have had to handle it. That's the point. You worked 60 hours a week. You should have been able to feed your family. But I couldn't. That's reality. I couldn't. So I did what I had to do. You almost killed yourself. But I didn't. I'm still here. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point is that it shouldn't have been necessary. The point is that the system failed you. The system failed us. And you just accepted it. You just starved yourself and smiled and acted like it was fine. He looked at me. I looked at him. And I realized I was crying. Angry tears. Frustrated tears. I didn't know what else to do, he said quietly. I was doing my best. I know you were. And that's what makes me so angry. You did everything right. You worked hard. You didn't drink or gamble or waste money. You did everything society says you're supposed to do. And it still wasn't enough. And nobody helped you. And you almost died. And we just ate and ate and ate while you disappeared. That's what I wanted. I wanted you to eat. I wanted you to be full. I wanted you to not have to worry. But I should have worried. I should have known. No. His voice was firm. No. You were a child. Children shouldn't have to worry about whether their parents are eating. That was my job. To make sure you didn't have to worry. Your job was to take care of yourself too. My job was to take care of my family. And I did. We sat in silence. Mom had come into the room at some point. Was standing in the doorway. I understand why you did it, I said finally. I understand the choice you made. I even understand that you thought it was the only choice. But Dad, it's damaged something in me. In how I see the world. Because now I know that love can look like starvation. And sacrifice can look like suicide. And I don't know how to make peace with that. He reached across the table. Took my hand. His hands were rough, scarred. Worn from decades of work. You don't have to make peace with it, he said. You just have to know that I do it again. Every time. Without question. Because you're my daughter. And that's what fathers do. But that's what I'm saying. That shouldn't be what fathers do. Fathers should be able to work and eat. Those two things shouldn't be mutually exclusive. In a perfect world, sure. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in the richest country in the history of civilization. We have the resources. We just choose not to use them. We choose to let people like you starve. And then we call your starvation noble. We call it sacrifice. We make it your choice instead of our failure. He didn't say anything. Just held my hand. I stayed at their house most of that day. We talked about things we'd never talked about. Things they'd hidden. Things I'd been too young to understand. I learned that the car breaking down all the time wasn't just because it was old. It was because Dad would siphon gas out of it to sell when money was really tight. 2 gallons at a time. Enough that we could still drive, but enough to sell for $10 that would buy groceries. The car ran rough because it was always low on gas. Not because it was old. I learned that we didn't move from the apartment to the house on Maple Street because they wanted more space. We moved because the apartment didn't allow gardens. And Mom needed to grow vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash. Whatever would grow in Ohio. She'd spend hours in that garden, canning food for winter, stretching our food budget by growing what she could. That garden wasn't a hobby. It was survival. I learned that every birthday party I ever had came from Dad skipping meals. For a week beforehand. The birthday when I turned 7 and had 5 friends over and we had pizza and cake. Dad ate nothing but bread and water for 5 days before so they could afford that pizza. The birthday when I turned 10 and got a new bike. Dad sold his grandfather's tools to pay for it. Tools that had been in the family for 3 generations. Irreplaceable. He sold them at a pawn shop for $60. Bought me a bike. And borrowed tools from neighbors for the next year whenever he needed to fix something. Every gift. Every small celebration. Every moment of childhood normalcy. Came from him subtracting something from himself. I learned that the reason they were so insistent I go to college was because they were terrified. Terrified I'd end up in the same situation. Terrified I'd marry young and have kids young and work myself to death and still not have enough. We wanted better for you, Mom said. We wanted you to have choices we didn't have. And I did. I had choices. I had a degree. I had a husband with steady work. I had enough food for my daughter. Because they went without. Because they sacrificed. Because they made sure I could escape. But here's what they didn't understand. I had escaped poverty. But I hadn't escaped rage. Because knowing what they'd done, understanding the system that made it necessary, I couldn't just be grateful and move on. I couldn't just say thank you and accept that this is how the world works. I was angry. And I was going to stay angry. Before I left that day, I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, looked at what they had, not much. Some lunch meat, eggs, milk, vegetables. Better than when I was a kid. but not enough for two people in their 60s who'd spent their lives destroying their bodies. For poverty wages. What are you doing? Mom asked, making a grocery list. Sarah, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I went to the store, spent $200, more than Marcus and I could afford. But I didn't care. I bought meat, good meat, chicken breasts, pork chops, steak, fresh vegetables, real bread, good coffee. Butter. Snacks. Cereal. Everything. I filled their kitchen. Dad tried to refuse it. Sarah, this is too much. It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. But it's what I can do right now. He looked at all those bags. All that food. More food than they'd had at once in years. And his eyes got red. Thank you, baby girl. Don't thank me. This shouldn't be necessary. You should have had this all along. From that day on, I brought groceries every other week. Even when money was tight. Even when Marcus and I were struggling. I made it work. Because my father had made it work for me for 12 years. But it didn't feel like enough. It felt like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. The months turned into years. Emma got older. I had another daughter, Sophie. Dad's health stabilized somewhat with medication. But the damage was done: ulcers, arthritis, bad back, chronic fatigue. All preventable. All unnecessary. All caused by a system that decided his labor was worth poverty and his life was worth nothing. We started having Sunday dinners at my parents' house. Every week, I'd bring some of the food. Mom would cook, and we'd all sit around that same green table. But now I watched Dad. Every single time, I made sure he ate first. Dad, serve yourself. In a minute. No, now. He'd look at me. I'd look back. We both knew what I was really saying. I see you now. I see what you did. And it's not happening again. Not on my watch. He'd serve himself. A full plate. But you know what? It didn't feel like victory. It felt like trying to fill a hole that was too deep. Trying to undo damage that was permanent. Trying to make up for 12 years of starvation with Sunday dinners. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. My relationship with my father changed after that conversation. Not in the way you might think. I still loved him. Of course I loved him. But there was something else there now too. Resentment. Not resentment of him personally, but resentment that he'd accepted it. That he'd let himself be ground down by a system that didn't care if he lived or died. That he'd internalized the idea that his suffering was noble instead of tragic. That he'd taught me, by example, that this was normal. That parents destroying themselves for their children was just the way things were. And I resented that I couldn't talk to him about my anger without hurting him. Because my anger wasn't personal. It was political. But he took it personally anyway. I did what I thought was right. He'd say, I know you did. But the fact that you had to make that choice is wrong. But I did have to make it. That was reality. Reality can be changed. Not by me, it can't. And that's where we'd hit a wall. Because he'd accepted his powerlessness. And I refused to. I started getting involved. Volunteering at food banks. Learning about food insecurity. Learning about poverty wages. Learning about the systems that create and perpetuate poverty. And I got angrier. Because the numbers were staggering. In one of the wealthiest countries in the world, 38 million people lived in food-insecure households. 12 million of them were children. And 41% of food-insecure adults had at least one employed person in their household. They were working, like my father worked, and still couldn't afford food. And society blamed them for it. Called them lazy. Said they should budget better. Said they should have planned better. Said they should have made better choices. As if being poor was a choice. As if working 60 hours a week for poverty wages was a choice. As if letting your children eat while you starved was a failure of character instead of a failure of society. I started advocating for policy changes. Universal free school breakfast and lunch. Not just for poor kids. For all kids. Because stigmatizing children helps no one. Increased minimum wage. Not incremental increases. Real increases tied to cost of living. Expanded SNAP benefits. Easier application processes. Less stigma. More access. Because food is a human right. Not a privilege you have to earn. Not something you should have to deserve a right. And I was done accepting anything less. People would ask me why I cared so much. You're not poor anymore. You made it out. Why are you so angry? And I'd tell them about my father. Not the sanitized version. Not the heartwarming story about a father's love. The real version. About a man who worked himself to death and starved himself for 12 years because society had decided his labor was worth $3.35 an hour. About a system that let him nearly die and called it noble. About neighbors who saw and did nothing. about churches that prayed instead of helping, about a government that could have helped and chose not to. That's why I'm angry, I'd say. Because it's still happening. Right now. To millions of families. And we're doing nothing. Emma is 16 now. Sophie is 12. They've never known their grandfather as the man who skipped meals. They only know him as Grandpa Bob. The man who sneaks them candy. Who teaches them how to fix things. Who falls asleep watching football games. But I've told them the story. Not when they were little, but now. Now that they're old enough to understand. I've told them about the man their grandfather really is. About what he did. And why, but I didn't tell them it was noble. I told them it was tragic. I told them it was preventable. I told them it should never have happened. And I told them that if they ever find themselves in a position to change things, to vote, to advocate, to help, they have a responsibility to do so. Because gratitude without action is just sentiment. And sentiment doesn't feed anyone. My father is 72 now, retired. His health is not great. The ulcers are managed with medication, but they'll never fully heal. The arthritis in his hands means he can't grip things the way he used to. His back is shot from decades of physical labor on insufficient calories. He has chronic fatigue. He sleeps 12 hours a day sometimes. All preventable. All unnecessary. All caused by a system that decided his life was worth less than the profits of the school district that employed him. Last week, we had Sunday dinner. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. Green beans. Rolls. All the things Dad loves. I was serving plates. Dad's first, like always. He put his hand over his plate. My blood ran cold. Dad? He looked at me. And smiled. I already ate. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Time stopped. Then he laughed. I'm kidding, baby girl. I'm kidding. Give me the biggest piece. Everyone else laughed. I didn't. Because even as a joke, those words still have power. I already ate. The lie that fed us for 12 years. The lie that nearly killed him. And he was joking about it. Making light of it. Because he still didn't understand that it wasn't okay. That it never should have happened. That his suffering wasn't a joke or a noble sacrifice. It was a failure. Not his failure, ours. Society's. All of us who let it happen. So why am I telling you this? Not for the reason you think. Not for some tearjerker moment where I tell you to hug your parents and be grateful. I'm telling you this because I'm angry. And I think you should be too. Not at your parents, for them. If you grew up like I did, with parents who sacrificed in ways you never saw, you have every right to be angry. Not at them. At the system that made sacrifice necessary. Because parents shouldn't have to choose between eating and feeding their kids. Ever. And the fact that they do, the fact that millions of parents are making that choice right now, today, while you're watching this video, should make you furious. I didn't make this video so you'd feel grateful. I made it so you'd feel angry. So you'd stop romanticizing poverty and start fighting it. So you'd vote differently, advocate differently, think differently. Because my father's story isn't beautiful. It's brutal. It's preventable. And it's still happening. Right now. To families just like mine. And until we get angry enough to change the systems that make starvation necessary, nothing will change. If your parents are still alive, yes, call them. But don't just thank them. Ask them if they need help. Ask them if they're eating enough. Ask them if they're really okay. And if they're not, do something about it. Don't let them suffer in silence the way my father did. And then do more. Vote for politicians who support living wages. Support SNAP benefits and school lunch programs. Donate to food banks if you can. Volunteer if you can't donate money. Advocate for universal basic income. For healthcare that doesn't bankrupt families. For housing that people can actually afford. For a system that values human life over corporate profits. Do something, anything. Because gratitude without action is meaningless. And I'm done with meaningless gestures. If your parents aren't alive anymore, honor them. But not by accepting their sacrifice as inevitable. Honor them by fighting to make sure no other parent has to make that choice. Make their suffering mean something by preventing others from suffering the same way. That's how you honor them. Not with gratitude. With action. With change. With rage that refuses to accept that this is just how things are. I thought dads always ate last. I thought fathers just weren't hungry at dinner time. I thought I already ate was the truth. And maybe it was, in a way. Maybe my father had already eaten, not food. But the sight of us eating. Maybe our full bellies fed something in him. Maybe watching us thrive while he wasted away gave him some kind of satisfaction. But that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it something we should accept. Or romanticize. Or perpetuate. My father shouldn't have had to starve. Your parents shouldn't have had to sacrifice. And until we're angry enough to change the system that makes sacrifice necessary, nothing will change. Nothing, thank you for watching this. I know it wasn't comfortable. I know it wasn't the heartwarming story you might have expected. But it's the truth. And the truth is uncomfortable. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. It should. If it made you angry, better. Channel that anger into action. Leave a comment. Tell me what you're going to do differently. Tell me how you're going to fight this. Tell me I'm not alone in this rage. Because I need to know I'm not alone. I need to know that other people see this and feel what I feel. That this isn't okay. That we can do better. That we must do better. Share this video? Not because it's heartwarming. It's not. Share it because it's true. Share it because it matters. Share it because maybe, just maybe, if enough people see it and get angry, we can start to change things. And subscribe to this channel if you want more of these uncomfortable truths. Because I have more stories. More reasons to be angry. More evidence that the system is broken. And I'm not going to stop talking about it until something changes. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 44 years old. And I refuse to pretend my father's sacrifice was beautiful. It was brutal. It was unnecessary. It was preventable. And it should never happen again. But it will. It is happening. Right now. Unless we get angry enough to change it. So I'll ask you one more time, are you angry yet? Because I am. And I'm not going to stop being angry. Not until parents can work and eat. Not until children can grow up without watching their fathers disappear. Not until sacrifice becomes unnecessary. Not until we build a world where I already ate is never a lie a parent has to tell. That's the world I'm fighting for. Will you fight for it too? Don't just call your parents. Fight for them. Fight for every parent who's skipping meals right now. Fight for every child who doesn't know their parent is starving. Fight for a world where hard work actually means security, where labor has dignity, where people matter more than profits. That's how you honor the parents who sacrificed. Not with gratitude. With action, with change, with a refusal to let another generation suffer the way ours did. Are you with me?